So I put the email together. Braxton sent it, and he sent it like at 10 o'clock at night. He got an immediate response from Carol Dawson, who was the older sister, and she just said, "Oh my gosh, we'd love to talk to you. That we prayed for you and prayed you'd show up, and even though Charlotte's not living, we would love to meet you and talk to you." And so Braxton corresponded back, "Well, actually, I sent this for my mother, and do you mind if she calls you?" So Carol gave me her number, and I called her a few days later, and we had a wonderful conversation, and she told me a lot about my birth mother, which she wasn't as close to her as she said her sister Cindy. So she said, "Do you mind if I give Cindy this information?" I was very adamant that her children not know, because what I found out from talking to Carol was her children did not know. Her 5 children did not know. She had 3 by 1 husband who turned out to be abusive. She got away from him, and then she married this other man who was the love of her life and had 2 more children. And anyway, he so I just didn't want them to know. I thought if Charlotte didn't, my birth mother did not tell them, I didn't feel it was fair to her, who couldn't defend herself, for if she felt she needed to. But anyway, as the story goes, Carol calls Cindy, and Cindy wanted to call me, and we had a wonderful conversation. She told me a lot about my birth father from what she knew, which was a lot, because the only person Charlotte had confided in was her sister Cindy, and told her the whole story from her vantage. She was 17. She was madly in love with this guy. She dated him for, I don't know, several months. There was another guy, John Peluso, and that's who she ended up marrying and having 3 children with, who wanted to go out with her, but she didn't want to go out with him. She was in love with Jim. Now, Jim evidently was from a nicer family. She was from a very poor family. And whether they saw it as her trying to get a better life for herself, whether she'd set him up for it or what, I don't know. But his parents sided with him and said that to leave their son alone. It was not his child, and that he had plans in his life, and to let it go. So they let it go, and that was their cue that he was not going to be involved. So then that, I think I said earlier about how the rest of that happened. So I was born. And so anyway, so Cindy's telling me all this stuff, which she gave me all this information, and I knew that since the birth mother had put Jim Wetzig's name on the to bill him, that she knew without a shadow of a doubt who the father was. But it just didn't work out for her. So, but Cindy let me know that not a day went by that she didn't agonize over me. And because she lived so close, she would go and watch me play on the playground. And she kept all the articles, like my wedding, because we put it in the newspaper, but she kept all that stuff. She had a box of stuff about me, and which is sad for her, and she kept it a secret. So, and I said, "Well, Cindy, please don't tell her children." And she said, "Bonnie, we are going to let this play out." And what I didn't know at the time was that after Charlotte passed away, this is such a tangled web, but before Charlotte passed away, Cindy's daughter got pregnant. She was an unwed mother, and Cindy shared Charlotte's story with her to try to make her feel better, that this happens. It's not, you're not a horrible person. Things happen. And so, but she was sworn to secrecy. Well, after Charlotte, my birth mother, passed away, evidently at Cindy's house, all the cousins were sitting around, and they were drinking some wine, and ironically enough, Cindy's daughter's name is Bonnie. Bonnie sort of slipped and said, well, and they all heard it, but they didn't buy into it. And she said they didn't really even say another word about it. But after I made the phone call to Cindy, she called one of the girls and she said, do you remember? And Jody said, yes, I do. And she said, well, she's contacted us. And I don't know if you're going to be interested in, talking to her. And Jody was like, absolutely, I want to talk to her, but let my other siblings know. So she called the other sister, who was not very receptive. She was very upset that her mother hadn't shared it with her. There was another brother who was very close to her, and he knew she was harboring something, but he never could figure out what. And they felt like part of her depression made sense now because she I guess she was depressed, and they knew there was something. But anyway, so all that being said, I have now met all of them. Jody and Gina came around. She decided she did want to meet me. So I guess this was in February. I don't remember. But anyway, I decided in that summer I was going to go see them. My children thought I was crazy. I jumped in my car and drove up. I drove right up to their house. I had never met them before in my life. And I have to tell you, I had such a peace, and that's what I told the kids. I said, I've got a peace about this. I think this is what I'm supposed to do. I drove up, and out came Cindy, out came Carol, out came Gina, who's a half-sister, Jody, who's a half-sister, and they were so welcoming. And I pulled up to this. It has beautiful flowers. They have beautiful, but it is basically a double wide in the country. But inside, it was clean as a pin. They had one bathroom, no air conditioning, 2 bedrooms, clean as a pin. You could have eaten off of any surface, and welcoming. They had all this food and soft drinks, and they're not drinkers, and it just was amazing. And so I had a really good, then come a few hours later, all these other aunts and uncles show up. She had 13 siblings, so they all start showing up. And so I got to meet all of them. And I got to meet Mark, a half brother. He showed up then. He came too. The 2 other brothers I did not get to meet. One of them is a colonel in the Army, and he's on some special, so I couldn't meet him, and Robert didn't have any desire to meet me. Since then, I have met them because I have gone back 2 other summers and met them. And so this one summer, Jody and Gina came to visit me. And Jody was adamant we were going to find this Jim Wetzig. And so she got on Ancestry.com. And I had numbers, which I thought were his. But she would try to call those, and they were all disconnected. So she got on Ancestry.com and Google and whatever. And Ancestry.com pulled up all this information. It pulled up Jim and Caroline's wedding picture. It pulled up his high school basketball picture. It pulled up his divorce records from his first marriage. It pulled up all kinds of stuff and phone numbers. So Jody wrote down all these phone numbers, and Gina and I were there just, oh my gosh, because we just didn't know what we were getting into. And so Jody calls, and Caroline Wetzig picks up. And she says hello, and she said, well, I'm Jody Yelverston, and I'm looking for Jim Wetzig. Do you happen to know? And, Caroline, oh, yes, and he evidently had been researching old friends and old relatives at the time. And so she was figuring, well, you're, an old friend or whatever. And so he's right here. So no, actually he wasn't available. She said, but he can't come to the phone right now. But I will get him to call you back. So he called Jody back, And I had given her a list of all these things. If he lived on Orchard Road, if he knew Charlotte Cunningham, if he drove this certain car, all these different things. And so Jody, she gets a hold of him and, oh, I just was curious I was going through some of my mother's things. She's passed away, and I just was curious if, I saw your name on something, and did you know Charlotte Cunningham? Oh, yes, he says, I knew Charlotte, and well, did you live on Orchard? Well, yes, and we didn't live far from each other, and she was beautiful, and, all these things he could answer. And she said, well, gosh, she said, that is great. She said, but I have another reason why I'm calling. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm at the home of my half sister, whose birth father is Jim Wetzig. And the phone went silent. And he said, well, now I don't know about all that, but I'd be happy to talk to her if she wants to talk to me. And Jody said, well, that's fine. Whatever you want to do. This is my number. So if you want to call me, I'll get you in touch with her. So that was the end of that. So this must have been in July. It was in July, because in October she called me and she said, have you heard from him? I said, no, Jody, I've not heard from him. It's okay. We probably really rocked him. Let's not, and he's married, and she probably didn't know about it, and nobody knew about it. And so she was like, all right. And so in November, she calls me, have you heard from him? And I was like, Jody, no, I have not heard from him. Please, let's just let it go. It's okay. Let's just let it go. And then the beginning of December, I was doing my Christmas cards, and I thought, I think I'm going to send him a Christmas card, because it had a family beach picture. And I thought, he might see some resemblance in us, or, it might spur his curiosity. So I got my Christmas card and I enclosed a note. And it was something like, my name's Bonnie McCauley Albritton. I was born March 15th, 1959, to a Charlotte Cunningham who had reason to believe that Jim Wetzig, whose birth date was, and I put the birth date down, was the father. And I believe that's you. I'm not looking for anything. I don't need anything. I have a wonderful life. I had wonderful parents and siblings. All I'm looking is to make a connection. That's all. And if you feel like you could have anything to do with me and want to get in touch with me, that's great. I did say, I said, ultimately it's between you and God. Only you and God know what the truth is and what the situation is. So I sent that, and I guess I sent it maybe a week before Christmas. And the 23rd, I think it was, my phone rang. And the name on the thing popped up as Carol Wetzig, which was his wife. And I was frantic, because I thought she probably was calling to say, leave my husband alone. And the voicemail came on, and he said, this is Jim Wetzig, and I'm trying to get a hold of Bonnie. I got this beautiful card and this wonderful note, and I really would like to talk. And I picked up the phone, and we talked for probably 2 hours. And he still was saying, I really don't think I have anything to do with you, but if you're looking for a father, or you're looking for, and I had to assure him I wasn't looking for a father, and I wasn't looking for anything that, but if he wanted to meet me, that'd be great. So we set up a date to meet, and I was moving into where I am now, and it took me a little bit longer. So I had to call and change the date, and so I pushed it back maybe 4 days. But there again, I got in my car and I drove to Charlotte, and I pulled up, and he was waiting outside. Because I'd gotten a little lost, and I could look at him and tell he had something to do with me, because I think I look like him a little bit. And so anyway, there he was, and we gave each other a hug, and his wife came out, and she's so happy and welcoming. And, so I went in, and so we're sitting there talking. And then all of a sudden, Caroline suggests that we do a DNA test, and she happens to have one. She had picked it up. She had been talking to somebody who was a nurse to her mother and father who had had a daughter get pregnant, and she said there was this DNA test. So Caroline's thinking, by the grace of God, Caroline has this DNA test, because I would have never thought of that. I didn't even know about. I mean, I knew about DNA tests, but I didn't know you could get them. So we had to swab our mouths, and so we did, and we mailed them off. And 10 days later, I got a phone call from Jim, and he said, "Well, hello, daughter." And, it had come back 99.9% that I was his daughter. So he sent me flowers, and so all that was kind of neat. A little weird, because he wants to call himself, he calls himself Dad. I refer to him as Jim. I just can't. He just wasn't my dad. So, and even my children, well, they call him Grandpa Jim, but they're not totally comfortable with that, because the grandparents they knew, we're different. But anyway, we've all met, and I've gotten together with them quite a few times. And they had one Christmas and 2 Thanksgivings. The other ones they've been sick, or something's come up. But it's been interesting, and it's been good. It's been good. I feel a little bit bad for him, because I feel like maybe he would like to get more out of it than, I mean, I think he would love it if I could call him Dad. I think he would love it if the kids came around more. I think, but I don't think he understands that we all have a life. We all have a life that's, and I don't mean have a life, but I mean, we just, he's not been a part of our life. And so we will see him when we can, and we enjoy seeing him, but we can't, we can't make it what maybe he would hope it would be. So, what do you think?